Hi, this is Julia Fulghum. I'm the director of Advance at UNM. Today I'm going to help you think through some strategies and tips for preparing your promotion and tenure dossier. I'm going to start out talking about the fundamentals that apply regardless of the level of milestone review you're applying for, and then have a couple of slides specifically targeting preparing the promotion and tenure dossier. If you are listening to this because you are thinking about applying next year, then the tenure extension policy links and frequently asked questions documents are available on this slide. I'm going to cover sort of high-level processes and strategies, and I can't emphasize enough that you should talk to your department chair early and often. Departments all have their own expectations, and you want to be aware of these before you start working on your dossier. Please keep in mind that I'm going to use research to broadly encompass research, scholarship, and creative works. You've spent a lot of time making decisions about all aspects of your career. And it's important to realize that you get to make a lot of decisions in terms of how you tell your story and what goes in your dossier. This is your adventure story. There are expectations from your department, your college or school, and the university, but this is your narrative, and you get to think about what you want the narrative to be. It's important that from the start you understand the expectations of your department and college or school. Some useful links are shown here. When I made this recording, the provost office did not yet have the 2021 P&T or promotion documents posted, but they're going to be similar to this past year's with one exception. And that is, as we'll discuss, you can write about the impact of COVID-19 in your research, teaching, and service statements. Arts and Sciences has a lot of useful documents up that step you through various aspects of this process. And regardless of the college or school you're in, you may find those useful. Not all colleges and schools have documents posted. For example, libraries, I know, has theirs on their intranet, and the College of Fine Arts goes by department policies rather than having a college policy. So make sure you're familiar with the policies you need to be. There are actually two different aspects of dossier preparation that you need to think about this summer. One is the part you're probably already thinking about, which is writing the research, teaching, and service statements. The Arts and Sciences Standard CV format also requires summaries of each of these. These are the more creative pieces of the dossier, and so you want to work on them when you're really feeling like you're inspired and motivated to get them written. People frequently struggle with these pieces, and they're the pieces we're going to discuss the most. There's a separate administrative component, as in there's a lot of organization and finding of information to do as part of the RPT software. The RPT software is what you will use to upload all of your dossier information. And what you'll find once you start to look at that is there's a lot of specifics like a defined file naming process, a specific format for your teaching evaluation. So you want to work on these pieces during the summer rather than leaving them to the last minute. But they can be things to work on when you feel like you need to make dossier progress, but you're frustrated or just too tired to think about it. So you can kind of iterate between these two and make progress all summer. To effectively tell your story, you need to know what the expectations are from your department and college or school. Everyone needs research, teaching, and service statements. The Arts and Sciences CV format also requires one-page total summary of these. Most departments expect dossier statements of about 3 to 5 pages. And honestly, committees outside the department at the college or school level and the provost committees are not going to be able to read statements that are much longer than that, just due to the sheer volume of work that they have. You may have already had to prepare your research statement for external referees, but if you haven't, you might want to talk to your department chair about whether you should prepare a separate, potentially more extensive research statement. The reason to do this is that you can have more technical statements that go to external referees than you would want to have for the dossier that's going to be reviewed internally. Departments have different approaches to this, so talk to your department chair. The other thing to think about is it can be helpful to have brief summaries of your teaching and service experience as part of the information going out to external referees. This provides the context for them in which you've been doing your research. The School of Engineering limits statements to 2 pages, and all faculty appointed after 2012 in A&S have to have a teaching portfolio. One difference this year is that you can write about the impact of COVID-19 in each of your statements. While for most of you, COVID-19 has provided a real challenge to your research and scholarship, many of you have been doing really heroic work in terms of getting your course material online and helping students. And you want to be able to write about this. How has this impacted you as a teacher and as a faculty member? Are you thinking about our students differently? This is your opportunity to explain what this has been like for you. And the ability to write about it in separate statements means you can perhaps write about it more positively in your teaching and service statements while addressing obstacles that may have come up in your research statement. Once again, make sure you're talking to your department chair and you are aware of college and department expectations before you start writing. Once you know what the expectations are, then you want to figure out what your narrative is going to be. Are you a rabbit or a duck? In general, committees want to say yes, and you can help them get to yes by telling a good story. And keep in mind, it's much harder to write a concise narrative than a long one, and so you want to give yourself time to do this. Sometimes, regardless of how accomplished faculty are, they can sit down and try and start staring at the screen to write up accomplishments and go, I don't know what to write. Boy, this determines my future. I don't know. Have I done anything? I think I've done things. Have I done things? And if you have one of these, or one of the many other reactions that are possible and that can provide some obstacles to your writing, deep breath. You are, in fact, good at stuff and things. You do have accomplishments. And if you're having trouble coming up with them, a couple of ideas here to think about. If you've been documenting your accomplishments all along the way, well, go through them and start to list those that might be the most significant. If you haven't been, pull out your annual reviews, any other review letters, and start to think about your accomplishments. I guarantee you have some, and start a random list. Don't worry about the scope or size of the accomplishment, just start a list. And then once you've got the list, you can go back and identify the significant pieces. Talk with a friend who knows your work and can help you brainstorm this, or join a dossier preparation group at Advance, and we'll help you with this. The goal is to have a list of 3 to 5 things that you want to emphasize, things you're happy about, proudest of, think are the highest impact, think are the coolest. And these are things you want to make sure you include, in addition to anything that you are expected to include. And this is then how you start to develop your story. Now let's talk specifically about preparing your promotion and tenure dossier. Unlike the mid-pro process, this time your work will have external reviewers. Half the people contacted will come from a list that you provide to the department. If you've not already been asked for names by your department chair or a department committee chair, you should talk to your department chair. Close collaborators can't be reviewers. This means you can't list your PhD advisor any postdoc advisors, or co-authors. There are some special exceptions to the latter if you're, for example, in a field where the standard may be to have literally hundreds of co-authors, or conversely, you're in a research area that has a particularly small community. Talk to your department chair about this. You can get letters of support from current collaborators and community partners. These letters go in the supplemental documents part of your dossier. If you go this route, you want to make sure people know the letters are there by pointing to them in the relevant statement, probably your research statement. Your research summary for the external reviewers will be due before the dossier is due to the department. And as I mentioned earlier, some departments you'll write a separate statement that will be a little more extensive. Remember that your statements are going to be read by colleagues outside the department on your college or school committee and the provost committee. So you want broadly faculty colleagues to be able to appreciate the work you're doing. So what motivates your work? What are your goals? Do you have big questions you're asking? What impact do you hope to have? You can frame your research using any one of these questions. So think about how you want people to appreciate the work that you're currently doing. Most of the documents should be about what you've done, but you want to be sure to include information on what you are planning to do, particularly if there are ways you are thinking about expanding your research, new things you want to start, moving forward, additional sorts of funding you want to seek. Let people know that you're looking beyond tenure. If you're in a field that has the expectation of establishing a research group, this is an important accomplishment to mention, particularly mentoring a range of students. If you have undergraduate and graduate students, talk about that here. If you have gotten letters of support from collaborators or community partners, point to them here so people know to look for them in the supplemental documents section. If you've had any delays, this is the time to address it and talk about how you have dealt or are dealing with it. In particular, if there's a few things you wanted to get done in the spring and were unable to due to COVID-19, you can address that here. You can talk about works in progress, but you want to make sure you are referring to them accurately in terms of the state that they are currently in. Graduate students who have gotten degrees or awards, had successes in conferences or in getting their own funding, all of that can be mentioned here. You can also talk about graduate mentoring in your teaching statement as well. Use your efforts to help graduate students to fully tell your story in the way that works best based on how you think about your research and teaching. As with the research statement, keep in mind your teaching statement will be read by colleagues outside of the department. So the course numbers and titles won't mean much to them. Help the reader by providing a context for your teaching. What's the audience for each of the classes you've taught? Are you teaching core classes, classes required for the majors? Have you developed new undergraduate or graduate classes for the departments? Help the reader understand all of this. How do you engage the students at different levels? What if you have found works best? Are there areas where you're trying to improve? Have you learned things about our students or about yourself as a teacher that have surprised you? And particularly for classes that you've taught multiple times, how have you changed your approach and what do you want to try next? Once again, the document should be a lot about what you've done, but you also want to talk about what you want to do next. If you've had any setbacks or issues, this is the time to constructively reflect on that And the teaching portfolio, if you have one, gives you an opportunity to do that more broadly. This is also the right place to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on your teaching. Many of you did heroic things to support students, and this is one of the ways to talk about it. You also almost certainly learned things about yourself as a teacher and about our students during this time, and talk about that here. If you are mentoring students beyond your research group, students from other departments, classes, if students come to you for support and mentoring, you are contributing to student success and the educational mission of UNM. Write about this here. Let people know about this aspect of your educational work. If you have works in progress related to pedagogical publications, any pedagogical research that you did not mention in your research statement, please mention it here as well. You should write a service statement rather than merely listing the committees you have served on. The list will be in your CV. This is the time to write about a couple of things you've done that have had an impact and that you're particularly proud of. You should consider all the different levels of service at which you've been involved so far and pick a couple of examples to demonstrate this. Some departments protect assistant professors from service, so the content for this statement is going to vary pretty widely depending on the individual experiences. You do want to write about what types of service are important to you, and if there are other things you want to work on after tenure, you should talk about that. If you are very engaged in community service, either before or since COVID-19, this is a great place to write about it and document these contributions. As with the other statements, you can have letters of support from community partners if you think that will be helpful, and point to them here. As a reminder, there's a lot of administrative work required to prepare a complete promotion and tenure dossier. Talk with your department chair about department expectations before you begin working on your portfolio. Some, but not all departments are going to want to see draft documents before you submit the final package for consideration by the department. So make sure you know the timeline for submitting the draft dossier and the final dossier to the department. You should also already know what the department will be sending to external referees and when they will send it. And if you haven't had this discussion with your department chair, have it now. If you haven't already organized your accomplishments, student committees you've been on, and everything else, then start to do that now. And on a related note, make sure your CV is updated, and if there is an expected format, that it's in one. Keep updating your CV until the very last minute. Have you had peer evaluations of your teaching since mid-promotion? Do you have several of them? If not, talk to your department chair this summer about arranging for them early in the fall semester. And finally, the RPT database that you will be uploading your dossier to has some file naming conventions that you need to be sure to follow. So figure those out and start getting those files renamed and organized over the summer. And that's the basics. I hope this brief presentation has been helpful. Don't hesitate to reach out to your colleagues, your department chair, advance.unm, or Associate Provost for Faculty Success, Bill Stanley, when you have questions or need help. Be safe this summer and take care.